Hi everyone, welcome to the second part of Pre-Calculus Lesson 2.7, One-to-One Functions and Inverses. So we were in the middle of talking about how to actually create inverse functions from a given function. So I have the function f of x equals 3x minus 2. And I actually have three steps that I follow. The first step is going to change this from function notation and just put a y equals there. So all I did is I just rewrite it like this because it's a little easier to look at and it's a little easier to manipulate. The function notation sometimes confuses people, so I usually just take it away because y is the same thing as f of x anyway. It's just different notation. So now what you're going to do is you're actually going to solve for x. So you're going to get x completely alone. And that will look like this. So first I added 2 to both sides, and then I divided by 3 on both sides. So I solved for x. And now the last thing I need to do is just change the notation. This x is going to turn into f inverse of x, and this y is going to turn into an x. So that looks like this. So f inverse of x equals x plus 2 over 3. Now you'll notice I did switch this x to the f inverse, and I did switch the order of that these came in because normally in function notation we have the function name first and it equals a rule. So I did switch the order, but that's okay because this is an equal sign. It doesn't matter which side each thing is on. So let's take a look at another example where we're finding an inverse. This is going to get progressively harder. So let's take a look at the next example. In this example, they want us to find the inverse of the function f of x equals x to the fifth minus 3 all over 2. So we're going to follow the same steps again. Start off by switching f of x into a y, and that's going to look like this. Okay, so now we need to solve for x. So the first thing that I would do is multiply both sides by 2. Then I would add 3. Then I have to deal with this x to the fifth power. So remember, to undo a power, you do a root with that power. So I multiplied by 2 on both sides. I added the 3. And now I need the fifth root of 2y plus 3. I did the fifth root on both sides to get this. Now the final step is just to change the notation. So the x is turning into f inverse of x, and the y turned into an x. So that's the basic idea behind finding an inverse. But let's take a look at a rational function next. These can be very tricky, but the steps are always the same. So once you know the steps, it kind of makes it easier to understand what's going on. So just as a reminder, a rational function is a function that's defined by a rational expression, meaning that I have a polynomial divided by a polynomial. So we're asked to find the inverse of the function f of x equals 2x plus 3 over x minus 1. And of course, the first step is to change the notation. I just put a y where the f of x used to be. Now, we need to solve for x, and it's going to be a little tricky because notice there are x's in both the numerator and the denominator. And because of the addition and subtraction, I am not allowed to reduce this at all. So I need to come up with another plan. And my plan would be to actually just multiply by this x plus 1 on both sides. And what that's going to do is you're going to have y times x plus 1. And I distributed here. Yx minus y equals 2x plus 3. Then I'm going to get the x's together on the right side and everything else on the left side. So I'm going to subtract this 3. I'm going to subtract the yx from this side. Now I'm going to factor to get the x's out of this expression. So I factored by a GCF. And then I'm going to get the y's to the same side by dividing by 2 minus y. Okay, now if that was a bit confusing, just pause the video, take a look at the written out steps, and see if you can make sense of them. But the good news is that we don't do this often. So if it's something that's difficult for you, just be aware we're not going to do it often. So now that I've gotten the y's to one side and the x on the other, and the x is all alone, I can just change the notation. And my final answer is going to be this. F inverse of x is negative 3 minus x over 2 minus x. Now, you can switch the order of this and have negative x minus 3. It doesn't really matter. But that is the inverse of our original rational function. So we have one last example, and that deals with graphing and looking at how the graph is produced for an inverse. In example 9, it says sketch the graph of f of x equals the square root of x minus 2. So we're going to start with that. And all I'm going to do is use a table of values to do this. So I picked x values and I put them in and I got y values. So I did 2, 0, 3, 1, and 6, 2. I just took the x value 2, I put it in here, 2 minus 2, and the square root of that. And I did the same thing for 3, and the same thing for 6. And I got these 3 points. Now you can do more points than that, but I knew that those would be off my graph, so I didn't do them. So now I'm just going to put the points on my graph and connect them with a curve. Okay, so here's 2, 0, 3, 1, and 6, 2. So that's my graph. Now, to use the graph to sketch the graph of f inverse, what I'm going to do is switch the order of these points. So I'm going to graph 0, 2, 1, 3, and 2, 6. Now, a word of advice is to try not to do this all in your head, because what's going to happen is it's going to confuse you when you're doing normal graphing. I always write it out because that way I have the points written out and I'm still graphing points normally. If you try and do it in your head, it gets confusing and then you mess up your ability to graph. Trust me, it happened to me. It was very embarrassing. So my new graph is going to look like this, and the points that I graphed are going to be these points. Okay, so I wrote out my points and then I graphed normally 0, 2, 1, 3, and oops, I wrote this one backwards, 2, 6. Okay, and notice that this orange graph is reflected across the line y equals x. That's the diagonal line that starts at 0, 0 and goes across the graph. So it's reflected right across this line right here. Okay, so it's flipped upward from here to there. Now, to find the equation for the inverse, again, we're just going to go through those same steps we practiced in the previous few examples. You would square both sides and then add 2. So it comes out to be f inverse of x is x squared plus 2. So that's everything in this lesson. Please let me know if you have any questions, and don't forget to do your homework.